Ghostbusters!
Ghostbusters from 1984 is my favorite film of all time. But there's plenty out there you might not know about this movie. I've talked about it many times on the channel, but there's a lot the average person just doesn't know that went into the production of this movie. And today we're going to talk about some of it. Let's get to bustin'. Some of this stuff you may have heard already, some of it, maybe you haven't. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to talk about is the original cast options. Ghostbusters originally had a few different actors in mind. The only one that didn't really change was Dan Aykroyd. Instead of Ernie Hudson, Eddie Murphy was intended to play the role of Winston Zeddemore. Apparently he ended up choosing Beverly Hills Cop instead, and I can't say I blame him. That movie was great, and he was the lead role. A lot of the lines for this character were then given to the character of Venkman, and Winston's role was reduced in the film. Even as a kid, I was confused as to why Ernie Hudson's name wasn't on the box, or listed on the cover. I was a kid, I didn't understand how billing for films worked. But despite this, Ernie Hudson has remained probably the most active in the Ghostbusters fan and convention community over the years out of all the cast members. Besides just that, when Dan Aykroyd was writing the movie, he also intended for John Belushi to play the role of Peter Venkman, the role that eventually went to Bill Murray. Obviously, Belushi and Aykroyd were great together, and the Blues Brothers holds up still to this day. It does make you wonder what could have been, because John Belushi was an icon at the time. I do feel like he's kind of lost to the newer generations, but hey, prove me wrong. John Candy was also in talks to play the role of Louis Tully originally, instead of Rick Moranis. But he famously wanted to play the role with a German accent, and he wanted his character to have 2 dogs, which the filmmakers thought would just be confusing considering the plot involved terror dogs, 2 of them. The thing is, all of these options are great, but it's hard to think of this movie any other way than it is. I mean, Rick Moranis is, without a doubt, one of my favorite comedic actors of all time, and so is John Candy. The role of Gozer was originally intended for Paul Reubens at one point. That's right, Pee-wee himself. And to be honest, this is the only one I feel like I really wish I could see. It sounds incredible, and not to take away from Slavica Jovan, but Paul Reubens? After the passing of Belushi, Michael Keaton was at one point attached to the role of Peter Venkman, but once Murray expressed interest in the role, it kind of just slid his way. For those of you too young to remember, before Batman '89, Keaton was known for comedic roles, so much so that people hated his casting in Batman. And it's worth noting that Bill Murray was apparently considered for the role of Bruce Wayne in that movie at one point. I'm kind of glad how that all worked out. Next up, we're going to talk about the law conflicts of Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters also had numerous issues with the law, before production and after. The title Ghostbusters was something Aykroyd was unaware was already used by a television series of the same name. During filming, they ended up using a bunch of other names like Ghost Smashers and other similar names.
If the answer is yes, then don't wait another minute. Pick up your phone and call the professionals. Ghostbusters!
They did this in case they couldn't end up clearing the naming rights for Ghostbusters, which thankfully they did. Then you also have the trouble with the Ghostbusters theme song, written and performed by Ray Parker Jr. Shortly after the film's release, Ray Parker Jr. was sued by Huey Lewis for plagiarism, alleging that he had copied the song from Lewis's 1983 song, I Want a New Drug. Eventually, it settled out of court in 1985 for an undisclosed sum, and a confidentiality agreement that didn't allow for public discussion of the case. However, that would be broken. Parker later sued Lewis for breaching this agreement in a 2001 episode of Behind the Music on VH1, after claiming again that Parker stole the song. Outside of that, we also have Casper the Friendly Ghost. In 1984, the creators of Casper, Harvey Cartoons, sued Columbia Pictures, claiming that the ghosts in the iconic No Ghost logo resembled Fatso from the Ghost Trio way too much. They sued for like $50 million and demanded all copies of the film be destroyed. The court would rule in favor of Columbia Pictures, with the judge deciding that there are only so many ways to draw a cartoon ghost. He argued that no one would be confusing the two properties. This is also interesting because later, in 1995, when Casper the Friendly Ghost, the live-action film, came out, Dan Aykroyd would make a cameo as Ray Stantz.
Who are you gonna call? Someone else.
And that's one of the best cameos of all time, let's face it. Next up, we'll talk about the early scripting differences. So the first drafts of Ghostbusters were written in 1981 by Dan Aykroyd. It was supposed to be an homage to Bob Hope in the Abbott and Costello monster movies. The story originally took place in 2012. The Ghost Smashers were an established business with franchises spread out, traveling through time, space, and other dimensions while fighting ghosts. They would wear helmets and have two wands attached to their hands that extend like antennas, and they would function similar to the particle thrower and proton pack in the final film. The ectomobile would fly, have a black paint job, and have flashing white and purple lights. The drafts would eventually come to resemble the final film we all know, but it goes to show where Dan Aykroyd's mind was when he was writing this. And if you know a lot about this stuff, you know just how deep it goes with his family. But we'll get to that later. Next up, we've got Slimer. Slimer wasn't actually known as Slimer in the first film. He was actually referred to as Onion Head, and was originally conceived as being much more frightening ghost. But as the ideas and tone shifted, that changed. And at one point, with less than 24 hours to go before the design deadline in July of 1983, Steve Johnson pulled out some photos of Belushi, did some cocaine, and got to work. He said that during this night he hallucinated that Belushi's ghost came to help him finish, encouraging him and giving him thoughts and even modeling for him. He warned him cocaine would kill him before leaving. We often hear that Belushi, was the basis for Slimer, but that story just takes it to new heights. 1983, what a time. Next up, we'll talk about the firehouses. So the iconic firehouse that the Ghostbusters live in and work out of is actually two firehouses in the first and second films. The exterior firehouse shots are in New York City and Tribeca. The interior shots, however, would be shot in LA, at an entirely different firehouse that was also used in films like The Mask and Lost Highway. Later, for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, they rebuilt the inside of the LA firehouse on a soundstage with painstaking accuracy and detail. These firehouses mean a lot to the fan community in general, but it's just built into the history now. If you're ever in New York City, I highly recommend stopping by Hook and Ladder 8 in Tribeca, and if they aren't busy, pick up a t-shirt or a sticker. Next up, let's talk about the haunted jail. Until 2024, the exact filming location for the jail scene was forgotten. On the commentary track, Harold Ramis said it was an out-of-commission jail in the middle of 14th Street, and Ivan Reitman comments that it was a police station. In 2024, the Cleaning Up the Town cast and crew members book was released, and the jail scenes were revealed to have been filmed at the former NYC police headquarters at 240 Center Street in Lower Manhattan. It was confirmed after Derek Osborne confirmed the address from the call sheet to the Cleaning Up the Town documentary filmmakers. There were a lot of rumors that this place was haunted, but from what I can tell, Dan Aykroyd may have started that rumor himself, I can't find any source other than him. Next up, let's talk about Ghostbusters props appearing in other movies. If you're a big fan of Fright Night, you might already know this. So the original puppet design for the first ghost we see in the film, the library ghost, was originally more frightening. Too frightening, perhaps, as it was deemed too much and ended up not being used for the final shot. Months later, when the same crew went to work on Fright Night, they ended up reusing and repurposing the structure and using it for the demise of Jerry Dandridge during the climax of Fright Night. They used the unfinished puppet to push through Jerry's face as he attempts to morph into a bat as he's dying. The PKE meter, most often used by Egon in this film, was actually later used in the 1988 John Carpenter film They Live, and again in 1991's Suburban Commando. That may not be super interesting to everyone else, but it's interesting to me. Next up, let's talk about the dream sequence in this movie. The iconic montage scene in Ghostbusters features a very interesting moment. The character of Ray, while dreaming, is visited in bed by a ghost who decides to fillet him. Now, who hasn't had this dream, am I right? No, but seriously, this was originally not part of a dream sequence. It was part of a much longer scene where Ray and Winston travel to Fort Dettering to investigate. This was apparently deemed too good to not use, so it was repurposed for the scene in the movie during the montage. Now let's talk about some unexpected cameos in this thing. Ron Jeremy makes an appearance in the film, not because, they contacted him and were like, we gotta get him in this thing, but because he just happened to be on the street when they were filming and ended up in the background of a shot. This is something my brother and I would talk about when we were young, like we knew who this guy actually was, Then we also have pop star Debbie Gibson. She makes a brief appearance during the scene at Tavern on the Green, where Louis Tully is banging on the glass. Although neither of these people have lines in the movie, it's interesting to see who pops up. And lastly, we'll chat about Dan Aykroyd's inspiration, which isn't something that just came about when wanting to make another movie. It's something that's always fascinated me as a fan of this movie and just of his work. He's mentioned many times that his family was very much a part of the spiritualism movement, and went as far as actually holding seances on their farm when he was a child. Locally, they were known for this. They would have groups and gatherings over to do this stuff. He's also talked about seeing UFOs many times himself, and as well as other paranormal experiences, ghosts. So his passion and his fascination with the paranormal, I think, really elevated Ghostbusters. I hope you learned something new about Ghostbusters. Maybe you knew some of this stuff, maybe you knew it all. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Love to hear from you.